Okay, so we're going to look today at how to write a reflection if the craft of writing section of your paper asks you to reflect upon your writing process. So over the course of the year, I've seen many different types of reflections that have been asked for by different schools. So this is a bit of accumulation of all of them and based off what Nessa has suggested you should do. So this is only a suggestion. If you have another way that you feel is more appropriate and that you're more comfortable with, then by all means use it, so long as you are meeting the criteria of a reflection. So the first thing to think about in your reflection is the structure that you're going to use. It would be good, if you're worried about it, to go in there with a very clear structure. So here is what I would suggest. So the first thing you're going to do, and keep in mind that each of these points is really about a sentence or two each, because chances are you've probably got less than 20 minutes to write this in. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to introduce or outline your concept in relation to the question you have been given. So this could mean that you have a look at the question from the creative, discursive or persuasive part of the question, and you either decide you can quote from it if you like to, you can take part of the stimulus of it, but effectively whatever it is, you use that to outline what your response is going to be about. So here you combine ideas in question and your own interpretation of that. So in this sentence, I should know which type of text you are writing and, generally speaking, the plot line or the outline of the argument. Okay, so that's your first sentence. 2 if you need to, but generally your first one. The next thing you're going to do is you can introduce your influences. Now you may be asked to discuss the influences in terms of ideas, or it could be in terms of the writing style that you have chosen to use. So whichever it is, give me the name of the text, give me the composer. If you like, you can give me a little bit of their context and purpose. Okay, because you need to be clear about who you are speaking about. All right, the next thing you're going to do. So this is where you get into the I suppose if you want to call it the analytical part of your reflection, where you are reflecting upon your own writing processes. So I'm going to write a list here of things that you can choose to discuss. The ones that you choose will depend upon the text that you are saying you are influenced by. I'll explain that more in a second. So you are going to discuss the following elements. I would suggest choosing 4 of them, because I don't feel you're going to get much more than that many in. So maybe you're going to talk about genre. Maybe you're going to talk about structure. Maybe setting. Maybe voice. Maybe language techniques. Maybe characterization. If you have other ones that you think are applicable and you'd like to talk about, then by all means, that's what you should be doing. Now, the ones that I would say that you definitely need to use is the language technique. So no matter what text type you're writing, which text you're saying you're influenced by, definitely reflect upon the language techniques that you have used at some point. Now the rest of it is really going to be determined by the text that you're using. So for example, say that you are going to write a metafiction piece because you studied a metafiction, Colin McCann's metafiction. Then it would make sense to discuss genre because you have mimicked the genre of one of your writers and that's what you've learned how to do. Say you are going to write as if you are, or mimic Noel Pearson's speaking style or writing style in Gough Whitlam's eulogy, then it would make sense to talk about voice because that's more applicable to a speech. So, and you wouldn't be, say, doing setting or characterization per se. So make sensible choices according to the choice of text that you are influenced by. Also, this will possibly depend upon the question. The question may ask you to mimic the voice of something, or to be a character from something, or to use the setting. They can ask whatever they want to ask you, in which case pick ones which are applicable to the question. To prepare for this, if I were you, I would be making sure that I had examples from my texts that I was going to be influenced by for each of these elements, to make sure that if I needed to speak about it, I could use judicious examples from the text that I'm influenced by if I decide to do this. Okay, so that's the structure, and then you can get, after you've done your analysis, you can have a concluding sentence. And that concluding sentence will be an evaluation of the learning process and writing process, sorry. Okay, so if that's your structure, then the next step is, okay, how do I actually discuss these things in this part here where the majority of your writing is going to be? What do I do there? So let's go over that. So if I make myself very clear, you can choose your writing style. NASA has made it clear that there is no one very specific way of doing this. So if you have a particular writing style, then by all means go with it, so long as it actually gives the information they want. But if we're going to have a look at a basic way of doing it, then the first thing to look at is what NASA tells us to do. So in NESA's website, in one of the question answer sections, they say these things. This is some of the things you can do in your reflection. You can use first person, which makes sense if you're reflecting. You can use evaluative language, also makes sense if you are reflecting upon something, to pass judgment on it. You can use examples from your text that you've written and your influencing text. Okay, you could use anecdotal references, they say. Imagery, metaphors. So you, in your actual reflection, you can use literary techniques if you wish to. So they're opening it up. You can do a lot of different things with this. So you could use explanation, which is probably the easiest one you're most likely to do. You can use description. You can use, or justification. Of your writing. And specific language techniques in that case. You can draw connections between what you've learnt, and what you've written. You can show a self-awareness of learning. We can be objective or subjective. Now I'm going to advocate being subjective and evaluative and self-aware because I feel like we're inherently better at speaking about ourselves than most other things. And I think it was probably an easier option, but as they've opened it up, you can do as you please, so long as you're actually partaking in the reflective process. So what is the reflective process? Effectively, it is a simple cause and effect situation. The cause being what you learnt in craft of writing. The effect being your writing developed. Okay, specifically your writing. All right. Okay, so really, in reality, at the most basic level, that is I read this, so I wrote this. And I suppose technically you could just write a reflection where you said that, but it's not very interesting. And in the scheme of things, it's probably not worth the marks that somebody else might give. So what are you going to do? How do you make something that seems so simple and possibly not particularly interesting, interesting? Some suggestions. Perhaps you can occasionally mix up the order of reflection. Don't always say, well, the writer did this and therefore I did this in reply. Okay, you could include multiple influences. Doesn't have to just all come from one text. Okay. Make sure you evaluate yourself. It's always interesting. And do so with honesty. So you don't walk around saying, I did this fabulously all the time. Acknowledge that perhaps there's something that you would like to have done better. There's nothing wrong with that. If you are worried about admitting fault, that's okay. Don't do that. But use evaluative language to show that you understand the power of what you've written, if that's what you're saying. So don't just say it shows this. Talk about it conjuring images, or you attempting to create an alluring picture, or you're attempting to challenge the audience. Something beyond just I showed, I represented, things like that. You can bring in your context and purpose. It would be good to see your purpose in your first sentence anyway, but you can repeatedly do it. You can repeatedly talk about what you were attempting to do. You choose a style that's you. If you're a funny person, write with that humour. If you're a serious person, use that to your advantage. If you like satire, use that. Try to show some of who you are in your own reflection style. Okay. Show what you developed. Not just what you copied. It'd be really boring to read a reflection which just says, the composer did this, so I did the same thing. He went and did this, so I did the same thing. She used this, therefore I used the same thing. That's really boring, and it doesn't really show much development of writing. You're meant to be showing and reflecting upon how you have developed as a writer because of the craft of writing module. Okay, so effectively it's going to come down to how much effort I guess you want to put into this. If you really want to smash this out of the park, go and learn some new words. Go and find interesting ways of talking about things. Get your feel, think and learn cards out and have a look at some other ways of saying the effect that you were trying to have. Talk about creating discerning images, or talk about forcing an inspection of the human nature, or to create a speculation, or surrendering, or creating imagery which forces the individual to surrender to another world. Be engaging. Language is engaging if used appropriately or interestingly. So let's have a bit of a practice of one. Okay, so let's say that I am going to use Ray Bradbury as my influencing text, and that was what I learned at school. So I'm going to do Ray Bradbury's The Pedestrian. So I've written my, let's say I'm going to write an imaginative piece, and then I've been asked to reflect upon it. And I've been asked to reflect upon the ideas and the language techniques or language devices used or something like that. Okay, so the information that I need to use is what he did and what I did, and then I need to write that into a couple of sentences because I don't have much time. So he did. I'm going to say, right, information I need to talk about. He's used dystopian world. It's a dystopian genre. Okay, so I'm going to talk about control, or he talks about, sorry, control, loss of individuality or something. Okay, then I'm going to specifically talk about what he does in his opening paragraph. And I might talk about the fact that he created this repeated imagery of this unnatural world because he repeatedly creates images of and uses the word silence. So the quote that I find in the opening that's quite interesting is that he says silence, then he says silences, then he talks about long moonlit avenues, and he talks about being alone in the world. He talks about frosty air. Okay, now things I might want to talk about here. Think about that. What did I learn about that? What did I learn about that piece of writing which really helped me craft my own? And I might say, okay, that could have been romantic. Because if you think about it, long walks under the moonlight, frosty air, in another world with another bit of representation, that's the beginnings of a love story. Okay? I'm going to say, but, I didn't make my box big enough, but it's okay. It seems unnatural. And it does kind of foreshadow this dystopian world. So as far as the techniques go, I have him using some imagery and I have him using repetition. There's plenty of other things, but those are the ones that I'm focusing on at this point. Okay? And then I go and say, like, what did I do? So I similarly tried to make a dystopian world. So that's my first point of call. And I could talk about genre, but I worked on my opening paragraph as well. And I really wanted to use that repetition and imagery to capture the unnatural world as well. So my writing was nothing broke. The silence of the room. A cavern of space and stillness, filled only by the uniform bodies tethered to the computer's hypnotic light. silent, still, but for the minute movements of machine-like hands. Okay, so that's going to be part of my opening paragraph. What have I used? Imagery and repetition. Okay. So I'm reflecting and I'm going to say, because I wanted to capture this similar unnatural state and foreshadow a dystopian world, that I use this similar imagery, dark imagery, and repetition of the notion of silence to create an eerie atmosphere. But I haven't just ripped him off. And I want to make a point of that in my reflection. I want to be interesting when the person reads my reflection. I say, but things that I haven't mimicked at the beginning, things like the setting. His is outside, mine's inside. Now that may seem trivial, but I can make it purposeful and meaningful. Perhaps I want to be a little more obvious. Perhaps I don't want my character to stand out from the crowd and be different. My character is going to be part of the dystopian world, unlike Leonard. So I've shifted the setting. Other things that I have done differently, the connotations in my writing are far less ambiguous. Up in Bradbury's writing, it could be romanticized, but it's up to us to fill in the gaps knowing that it's a dystopian text. For my piece of writing, there's very little room to do that. And perhaps I'm going to argue that the shift in connotations is because I don't believe that the subtleties of Bradbury's writing are necessarily appropriate for a world descending so quickly into an obsession with technology. So I'm giving a reason why I have shifted the connotations, that I wanted to have evoke deep fear at the possible end point of our technologically obsessed society or culture. Okay? And therefore I used far more blunt. There's no ambiguity. Okay, so I'm making a reason why I have done what I have done. Okay, so this would be just one part. Now, if you choose not to quote from Bradbury, fine, but make it clear what you think that he has done, and make it clear what you learnt from that. You learnt the power of these techniques because they created this unnatural world, and you wanted to emulate that power, so you did a particular thing as well. And you continue this process, showing the information and knowledge that you have and evaluating yourself as you go. As I said, you've probably got less than 20 minutes if they ask you for one. So you need to be concise as possible, and about 4 of these would be good, given that in their sample papers, I think they awarded 8 marks to a reflection. So it would be good to know some evidence from the text that you're saying you're influenced by. If you are a person who knows quotes from other people, great, use it. If you're a person who likes song lyrics and you feel like they're appropriate in terms of trying to achieve what you want to say, then that's fine too. Okay? Poetry, whatever else comes to mind in terms of using intertextuality, that's fine. Whatever it is that will make your piece of writing interesting to read and reflective of your process, you should use. But you need to practice doing that because you need time management and you need clarity, which requires preparation. So it's always worth, whenever you do a practice piece of writing for your imaginative, persuasive or discursive, that you could do a reflection afterwards and discuss where you learnt how to do what you just did. Okay. All right. There'll be practice questions up for reflection on our site. If you are just tuning in and you would like some extra help, just contact the Ponder Realm and I will send you some practice questions. Okay, thanks, bye.